Hello and welcome to Transfer Deadline Day live on local TV Tyne and Wear and local TV Leeds as we look back at a summer of business and count down to the window slamming shut at 7 o'clock this evening. My name is Daniel Wales and as Northern Sports Editor I'll be your host and reporter covering Newcastle United, Sunderland and Leeds United during this show. Now, it's fair to say that it's been an incredibly busy and active window for all three of those clubs. Sunderland and Leeds United have both made a host of new signings to bolster their squads for life in the Premier League. And Newcastle United have tried to add depth and quality to cope with competing domestically and in the Champions League this season, as well as, of course, attempting to deal with the ongoing Alexander Isak situation. And that is exactly where we'll start. So let's head up to Newcastle United's training ground at Darsley Park to get the latest. Late last night, Newcastle United and Liverpool agreed a fee of £130 million for the sale of Alexander Isak. It brings to an end the transfer saga of the summer, with the Swedish striker now set to head to Merseyside for a medical to complete what will be a British record transfer. There was always a feeling that Liverpool would come back to the table following a bid of £110 million being rejected earlier in the summer, and so it has proved, with a meeting between Isak and high-ranking Newcastle officials last Monday likely being the straw that broke the camel's back, with the situation reaching the point of no return between Isak and the Magpies. The upshot is that Liverpool will have got their man, and Newcastle will have received a huge fee that will transform their PSR situation for some time to come, although many associated with Newcastle may only see this as a good deal if the club are able to secure another forward signing on deadline day to bolster their attack. We'll have more on that later, but for now let's hear from Eddie Howe speaking after the loss against Liverpool a week ago, and just after that meeting between Isak and Newcastle officials had taken place.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that, but I've not been party to talks on this for a long time now. So I've been preparing the team, giving all my energy to the players that want to play for Newcastle. I think that's where my energy is best put at the moment.
Thank you. Are you round up? Eddie, obviously you're in the last sort of few days of the window now. Is there a danger that you could get pulled into perhaps signing a player that was nowhere near the top of the list at the beginning of the window?
Well, I think your names at the beginning of the list and the end of the... Sorry, your names at the beginning of the window and the end of the window are always very different because a lot of the players will have moved. So naturally, I think that's always the case if you're still active in the market, which we are. But as I've said all through the window, we have to be careful we don't make a decision that impacts the long term and future windows and gives us big problems. So any decision we make will always be based around controlling PSR, good financial decisions, but also against our need, and our need is there. So let's see what happens in the next few days.
Do you still retain any hope that you could perhaps keep Alex at this club?
Yeah, as I say, I'm not party to the talks that have been happening, so I've got no idea where that stands right this second. Our side, Newcastle side, is we want clarity, we want to move forward, we want the sort of narrative to change because we're in the start of the season now. We're into the action and we've got to get results and we've got to try and focus on what we can control. We've shown our togetherness and unity, we've shown our fighting spirit, we've shown that we have put the distractions around us away, but you'd just like a bigger return to sort of show ourselves and show the rest of the world that that is the case. Sometimes football doesn't give you that, and I do believe, though, you'll get your rewards longer term if you continue to play as we have done. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
So, I'm joined now by Andrew Musgrove of the Everything is Black and White podcast, part of the Chronicle. Andrew, late last night it was Newcastle United and Liverpool agreeing a fee in the region of £130 million for Alexander Isak. Now, on the surface at least, you could argue that Newcastle have caved, but also you could argue that Newcastle are getting a really good deal for a player who's been on strike for some time and who hasn't had any pre-season. So how did you see it initially when it came out?
Inevitable. I thought it was going to happen. In terms of the fee, yes, we were told that Newcastle were going to hold out for at least £150 million, but I think they're in an impossible position, really, simply because they've got a player who doesn't want to play for Newcastle United, and he made that clear as recent as last week. So what were they to do? If he wasn't sold to Liverpool, how difficult would it be to reintegrate him into Eddie Howe's squad, where really it is a squad that is built upon that spirit and drive to work for the badge? And you've got a player there who's made his intentions very, very clear that if he didn't get his move away from Newcastle United, he didn't want to play for them again. So I think the club have looked at that and thought, okay, we can get a big fee. Yes, maybe £20 million than we originally wanted, but £130 million is still a huge, astronomical price to pay for anybody these days. And that can be reinvested into the playing squad. And actually, if they manage to get a second striker in today, you could argue, alongside all the business they've already done, they come out of this stronger.
Well, we'll come on to that in just a moment as well. I think if you look at perhaps from the supporter perspective, certainly games recently, Newcastle fans have voiced their disdain for Alexander Isak. Lots of chants that certainly have shown just where the sentiment is from the supporter fan base. So despite the fact that they are losing a player who won them a cup final, who was revered, who scored twice against Sunderland, the way he's acted, clearly those bridges had been burnt. And so from that perspective, do you think that Newcastle supporters are actually, despite what he's done in a black and white shirt, happy that he's probably not going to be here anymore?
Yes. I think the majority will be, because, as you say, the bridges have been burned. And I never saw a way back for him. I know Eddie Howe was very diplomatic every time he was asked about it, but he had to be, because there was a chance that he would have to try and persuade Alexander Isak to pull on that black and white shirt again after the deadline had gone. But I was never convinced it would work, simply because this club means so much to the fans. They'd give anything to be able to pull on that black and white shirt just for 30 seconds to run out onto that pitch at St James's Park. And Alexander Isak is getting paid big money to do that, and is refusing to do that. And he's disrespected the fan base, disrespected Eddie Howe, and disrespected his teammates, and more than anything, the club as a whole. So I don't think you'll find many Newcastle United fans, if any at all, who are sad to see him go. I think where the sadness comes in is how his legacy's been tarnished, because you mentioned there what he achieved, and he could have gone to Liverpool this summer with that legacy intact, and Newcastle United fans would have reluctantly seen him go. But with a big price tag, that would have been a little less hurtful. What has hurt them more than anything is the way he has acted. And unfortunately for him, for the fan base, and to be fair, I'm not really sure he'll care too much, because he's got his move at the end of the day. It's that legacy that's been tarnished, because we should be thinking about the cup final and, and him scoring. But I know people who can't even watch him score that goal anymore. And that's really, really sad.
I think if we just finish, though, on the final point, is that gaining £130 million sorts Newcastle out PSR-wise for years and months to come. And from that perspective, given how much it's been, briefed in the media and talked about PSR, it does bring those issues to an end for at least a little while.
Yeah, you still got to be careful, and still got to do the calculations and the accounts, and still spend very wisely. But obviously it's a massive boost, and it's that kind of Coutinho moment, isn't it, that Liverpool had when they sold him to Barcelona. So that's the way I was always looking at it. Sell Alexander Isak for a big amount of money, make sure you get a replacement in, and then actually you're in a really healthy position to go on. Now look, it was always going to be difficult to replace Alexander Isak, because he is the best striker in the world, and that's why he was worth £150 million, in my opinion. But time, the situation is against Newcastle, so you can see why they've accepted a little bit less. But you were never going to be able to replace him like for like, because no one is as good as him. What you needed was two strikers who can score your goals, and in Wissa and Valdemar, that's what they have, if they can get Wissa over the line, and then look towards January and next summer and spend that money. And Newcastle United really, like I say, they get Wissa in, I think they come out of this window looking a lot stronger because of the other business they've done. And then you look towards next summer and you say, well, in a year's time, they could be even better, and we'll all forget about Alexander Isak.
Let's move on now to Sunderland. The Black Cats have had an incredibly active transfer window, starting with Joe Bellingham and Tommy Watson moving on to pastures new. They've since brought in 12 new players at the time of recording and are hoping to not continue the trend of sides being promoted to the Premier League, heading straight back down to the Championship. Let's head straight down to the Academy of Light to see if any final incomings are likely on Wearside. It would appear that new arrivals are indeed likely here at the Academy of Light, with Sunderland having agreed deals to sign Ajax forward Brian Brøby, as well as RB Leipzig defender Lucharal Geertruida, with the latter of which being a loan deal with an option to buy. Interestingly enough, Sunderland's move for a new forward comes after Chelsea agreed a deal with Sunderland to recall Mark Gu, who had only joined the Black Cats on loan earlier this summer. He managed to score one goal against Huddersfield Town in the Carabao Cup, but now will return to his parent club as Chelsea come to terms with Liam Delap's potentially long-term injury suffered at the weekend. Regis Lebris had remarked before his side's victory against Brentford that he would like more incomings, as well as talking about the business done already this summer and how it will prepare them for the rest of the season ahead in the Premier League.
I think one of the important point we had during the recruitment process was the pace and the rhythm. We know that this league is really demanding according to the intensity, the high sprint load and so on. So far we showed that the players who came in are connected with this idea. It's really clear. After that, for the depth, it's still possible to increase the numbers for one or two positions, and I hope it will be the case at the end of the transfer window. But I'm still confident because I like the versatility of 2, 3, 4, 5 players. They will help, able to play, for example, as a winger or as a midfielder, as a striker or as a winger, for example. So just wait 3 days and we'll have the definitive squad.
On that point there, you mentioned that you could bring in a couple more new players. When the window does close on Monday evening, how will you sit and reflect on it in terms of making this club Premier League ready?
I think we'll know at the end of the season, or maybe earlier if it's possible. It's still a difficult task for a club, sometimes for a manager, because we have two timelines. The first one is the squad we have, and we have to believe that this squad will be ready and work with them, support them, trust them. And the other side, if we can improve with 1 or 2 more signings, maybe it can help the process. So at the end of the transfer window, this part will be closed and we'll have a strong focus just for the development of our squad. And I think with young players and young team, because the experience is not huge, the expectation is higher because the room for improvement is big.
Leeds United next, and like Sunderland, they have had a busy summer of incomings as they look to add to their quality for life in the Premier League. So far, they've managed 1 win, 1 draw and 1 loss in the league. But are they still active on deadline day? Well, they are indeed hoping to make moves, but whether they do or not remains to be seen. Goals have been hard to come by so far, which would suggest that another striker may well be on the wish list at Elland Road. Let's listen to what Daniel Farke had to say ahead of his side's draw with Newcastle United to work out his thoughts on whether any new arrivals may be likely on the final day of business this summer.
We were always open and transparent of what we are doing. We wanted to strengthen on all positions. I think we have more or less in the defense, goalkeeper position, fullback position, central midfield, our additions that we wanted, and we made no secret out of this. That till the last day of the window, we will look also to strengthen our offense a bit more. We've done this in the past days, also with Dominic and with Noah. But we're trying also perhaps in this area to strengthen our squad a bit more. Yes. Like I mentioned, we want players who are more or less proven on a good level, and Noah has played many games on Champions League level, has scored for Red Bull Salzburg. He has played for big clubs, also in Italy. He has scored there, and this is good because he's proven on a top level. But also to show this with consistency, then for example also in the best league in the world, is something you have to prove. And for that, in this age, 25, he can find this consistency and has to improve as well. Also in different areas, and we also spoke with him about this before we signed him. And if we commit also to, I know nowadays it's not much money what we have spent, and perhaps for many of the other clubs it would have gone through like, okay, it's more like just a project. For us, it's relatively a high amount that we've spent on him. If we do so, we expect then also that he plays also important part in the future and can develop into something, and also hopefully can raise his value. So we wouldn't spend much money on a 36-year-old who has just 1 year to go. So for that, it's of course the focus is on the here and now, and on this level you have to deliver straight away. But one eye is also, if we commit for us to a big sum of money, is also like we want at least to keep his value, or perhaps even to improve his value. This is also quite important, yes.
Now, to finish off, let's return to the situation at Newcastle United. With Alexander Isak off to Liverpool, will Newcastle United bring in another striker? Many believe that this will be the key for the Magpies coming out of this saga in a good way. Let's head again to the Newcastle United training ground to hear the latest, with time running out in the transfer window this summer. Well, Newcastle United appear to have got themselves another striker, with a long-awaited move for Brentford's Johan Visser finally being agreed today for around £55 million. Some will see that as an overpay, given Newcastle's last offer was in the region of £35 million for a soon-to-be 29-year-old in the final year of his contract. Newcastle, however, will hope that Visser is able to take some of the pressure off Nick Woltemade and score plenty of goals himself, given that he netted 19 non-penalty goals for Brentford last season. The Magpies could also be on the verge of selling William Osula to Frankfurt in Germany for a fee in the region of £30 million, in a deal that would include a buyback option, according to reports. That, combined with Isak's sale, should generate a great deal of PSR headroom for Newcastle United. So now, Andrew, looking at replacements for Alexander Isak, and we've had it now confirmed that Johan Visser, a deal has been agreed between Newcastle United and Brentford for a fee in the region of £55 million. And we talked about that compromise, and it seems to have been reached between the clubs. Brentford coming down from over £65 million that they wanted initially, Newcastle going up from 35 that they had bid. They've met perhaps a bit closer to Brentford's fee that they wanted, but it is a meeting in the middle, and ultimately Newcastle getting someone else in alongside Nick Woltemade, and that's really crucial, because if Newcastle are to get back into Europe this season and also compete well in the Premier League domestically, the Cups and Europe this season, they're going to need that influx of goals, and Johan Visser alongside Nick Woltemade should provide that.
Yeah, Premier League proven. You know, you can't argue with what he's done at Brentford. 49 goals in his time there. He's a really, really good striker. Gives Newcastle United something a little bit different as well. Probably going to be the number 9 as well, and he's not hiding away from that responsibility that comes with wearing that shirt. And yes, look, the fee is a little bit scary to some. I mean, 55 million for someone who's going to turn 29 next month. This month, actually, because it's a September birthday, and is also going to be missing for a month to come December for AFCON. You know, it is a big amount of money, but if Newcastle United can qualify for the Champions League for next season with Visser scoring 15 goals again, then it's worth every single penny, isn't it? And Newcastle United needed that second striker in, regardless of the price, really, to help their new record club signing settle, and to make sure that they had options, because suspensions, injuries, lack of form, it's inevitable. That will hit Newcastle United at some point this season. So to have options to kind of be the solution towards that, and to have options to rotate, it's a good signing. Newcastle United have had him on their radar for, of course, all summer, so they'll be happy to get their man. Yes, if I pay a little bit extra, but I think all things considered, deadline's upon us. They've lost Alexander Isak. They'll be happy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And as you say, if he does the job for Newcastle, wearing, as you mentioned there, probably the number 9 shirt, Newcastle, will they actually care, or will the supporters care about the overpay? Probably not. Well, that is all we have time for on transfer deadline day. It's been a huge day of breaking news, but the big question is, have our three clubs done enough over the course of the summer to be competitive this season? Well, at least until January, when the window reopens for a month. Sunderland and Leeds have spent big, and the Alexander Isak saga is finally at an end. And now the Premier League will take over after the international break. Thank you all for watching and for enjoying this